plenty. When meat turns to weed like the roots from the tree, it pushes everything up from underneath. Well, together we rise, together we thrive. We believe in circles, 'cause circles take no sides.
I was born with essentially double hip dysplasia.
I was severely emotionally disconnected.
I had 2 years of pain, colic, and later on it developed into sort of an IBS where they didn't really know what it was.
By 24, I had terminal cancer.
And I found myself facing cancer.
I became really, really sick. Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune, multiple chemical sensitivities, allergies, you name it, I had it. Depression and even suicidal ideation, which is the professional name for I wanted to kill myself.
I was basically having gut issues.
I remember
going to the toilet and
having
bleeding
bronchitis as a
like
child.
every single time.
I was sick with the measles.
My best friend, Michael Goldberg,
he was on
who wrote
12
Co-Runnings of
medications.
Little Giants. He got brain
four
cancer.
Different specialists,
four
very highly qualified doctors that were
chronic
just
weird
readjusting,
stuff
giving
that
them
you
more
often hear about,
medication or
digestive
different
issues,
medications or adding on medication.
I was 20 years old. I was diagnosed with viral issues,
running the show in
Lyme
school,
disease. I had really severe joint pain,
I was crying
muscle
all the
spasm,
time.
My
neck pain.
grandfather
Like I was in
got
pain
some
all the
surgery.
time.
My father
And I
got
had this
surgery,
like
and my uncle got
flu-like illness
surgery.
of feeling
And they all
that
had
like
the same surgery on their
fevery,
guts from
inflamed
the
kind
same
of
kind of
fatigue.
I had
symptoms that I
symptoms of
personally
anxiety,
was
irritable bowel, a whole range of things. It's like my whole body was collapsing.
I had trouble eating.
My kidneys were
food.
fighting for survival.
Bloated and a lot of things. I
was in bad shape. I was in a very scary
all of a
spot.
sudden developed out of nowhere.
When they'd hear some of my story, whether it be the broken necks or the cancer or whatever, they'd say, well, God must really have something he wants you to do.
Doctors had given up on me, so the only person who was going to heal me was me.
Beginning to open myself emotionally was a very powerful first step in my healing journey.
And as I learned how to be a better version of myself, then the healing happened automatically and naturally. The body's designed for that.
I was able to heal all the gut imbalance that I had, and I realized that everything and anything can actually be healed.
My dad starts praying for me, just asking God to help me. And in the middle of this short prayer, a miracle actually happened. I can only call it a miracle. I had this change that started at the top of my head and went whoosh through my body to the soles of my feet. And I was instantaneously healed.
It happened in such a short time. Sometimes we really got to grow and learn for a longer period, but the transformation when it happens, when you're ready, it can be so fast. Like you can hardly believe how quickly the body can change.
Like I had reversed in age a good 20 years in 6 months.
Thinking about terrain theory, my inner terrain, as inside effects. It's all inside effects.
So I'm living proof that it is possible to heal very, very serious disorders naturally.
And I started this Laugh for Life therapy program in the Valley at a cancer facility. He showed up for all of it. He took all the prescriptions, the guided laughitation I created, and he lived 15 years past that prognosis of 3 months that the doctors gave him because he had a will to live, because he could laugh and have joy in his life.
I went to the medical system, and the medical system didn't have the answers, and so I wound up ultimately discovering natural health and natural healing, and that was what solved my health problems.
My fascination with the body's ability to heal itself started when I was just a child. My aunt came to me and she told me that she hadn't been feeling well, so she went to the doctor. She took a myriad of tests, and ultimately the doctor told her that she had cancer spread all throughout her body, and that she had 2 weeks to live, and that she should get her affairs in order. She looked at the doctor and said, I don't think so. I think I have more to do on this earth. I'm going to go home and I'll come back in 2 weeks. And that's what you gave me, right? 2 weeks to live. I'll go home and then I'll come back in 2 weeks and I'll go ahead and take all of your tests again and we'll see where we're at then. Of course, the doctor looked at her like she was crazy. But she came back 2 weeks later. She took all their tests and sure enough, all of the cancer was gone. She said that there were a lot of doctors looking at the before and the after photos of her tests, and they were surprised at what they were seeing. 2 weeks ago, cancer spread all throughout her body. 2 weeks later, no cancer. She looked at me and she said, "Keith, never let anybody tell you how long you have to live, even if they're wearing a white coat." Now that really landed for me as a child. And because of that, I've never had a cancer diagnosis, nor have I feared one. A few years back, I had a healing of my own. I had been living with level 9, level 10 pain for 26 years. I had multiple car accidents and a big screen television fell on my shoulder. So I tried everything to get rid of this pain. I went to every doctor. I had cortisone shots. I went to the chiropractor. I had acupuncture. I worked with Reiki healers. Every healer tried everything. I ended up telling my friend Dr. Karen Kan and my other friend Lisa Warner about my pain. And they both asked me if I would go ahead and give them a shot. So I booked 2 calls with Karen Kan. I did those calls and I was having some success. And then I met with Lisa. I had 1 phone call and 1 in-person meeting with Lisa Warner. It was in that in-person meeting with Lisa that she told me something that really just turned a light on. It really clicked in my head, and what she said to me made a complete difference in my life. And ultimately, doing what she taught me, all of my pain disappeared almost immediately. Having the pain leave my body after all these years, it made me want to tell the world about Lisa and about Karen. And so I thought, what greater way to do that than to make a film exploring the body's innate ability to heal. So the first thing I did was I set up a shoot with 3 women who I knew had a healing story here in Florida. These 3 women are Kathleen Boback, Mia Hull, and Maria Elena. I interviewed them having a conversation about their healing. And in watching their conversation, ultimately that's what helped me come up with the very questions that I ask every expert in this film. After they finished their conversation, Maria Elena took me for a tour through her beautiful plant nursery, and she showed me her medicinal garden. After completing that shoot, I decided that I would go up to New York and interview Dr. Karen Kan, Lisa Warner, and my friend Deanna Courtney. After completing those interviews, I asked each of them, who do you know that I should be interviewing and asking these questions that I just asked you? They made recommendations, and as they say, the rest is history. This has been an amazing journey for me, and I'm so excited to introduce you to these experts. I'm hoping that you'll do what I did. My ask is that you come to this film with an open mind and an open heart and a willingness to possibly learn some new things. So enjoy this journey with me as we look at the inside effects. Do we create ill health ourselves?
I want to say that we are not consciously creating our suffering, but we are consciously choosing to suffer. We aren't consciously creating our ill health. We're consciously choosing to resist what is happening. When we run the perspective of I'm stuck, I'm afraid, I'm a victim, I'm angry, I'm resentful, and we aren't able to choose differently, we're sending those signals to our hypothalamus, to our autonomic nervous system, and our body responds in fight, flight, freeze. And that biochemistry shuts down the immune response. It shuts down our ability to detoxify. And over time, I say that our body becomes kind of like a cess pond or stagnant water because we're not actually letting go of the past. We're holding on to all of that energy, viruses, pathogens, cancer, toxins build up. Things like that can build up when we are not flowing.
Many times, people do create ill health themselves. I often refer to these either through emotional poisoning, or mental poisoning or environmental poisoning. These are three things that can contribute to ill health.
I think there is a part of us that plays a role in the creation of everything in our lives. We might not play a full, complete 100% role, but I think there is a percentage that we play in a lot of these things. And if you can get past the pain and anguish and inconvenience often of a sickness, then you can see through to the gifts that it's giving you. And actually, part of the healing process is to find those gifts.
So a question that pisses a lot of people off is, do we create ill health ourselves? If I was giving my simple answer, I would say yes. And if I was expanding on that simple answer, I think it's necessary for us to have the self-responsibility to own we create our ill health. But that doesn't mean we intentionally do it. It doesn't mean we take out our manifesting journal and set our intentions like, I'm going to have horrible back pain. I'm going to have hemorrhoids. That's what I'm going to manifest hemorrhoids into my life. So if we're not doing it consciously, I think an open-minded person can consider, how might I have done this unconsciously? Not intentionally, but I think it's important that we own it's our fault. Because if we don't do that, we're discounting the power of what created it. And I believe that holds the paradoxical reality where therefore we're also discounting the power to heal it. So if we have the self-responsibility to say, yes, at some level, I did this to myself. Might have been a lack of education. That is my fault that caused me to be eating foods that were detrimental to me. Could have been because I didn't know about this. Could have been because I never processed this traumatic memory, but I forgot about it. But nonetheless, that's all still on us and it's our fault. And that is great news, because if it's our fault, then it means we also have the power to heal what we created for ourselves.
Think about this. Like, people give people crap when they eat healthy. People are like, what are you doing? You're going to just eat the stuff the way it comes off the trees and you're not going to, eat horribly, and you're not going to, and I always think to myself, could you imagine if the opposite happened? Like if we're in a world where everyone is just eating off the trees and everyone's healthy and connected and they're thankful and they're in this different vibration, and one person's like, hey guys, I'm going to go drink that thing that dissolves nails, and then I'm going to eat hardened cow milk. Like basically I'm going to get it to mold. And then I'm going to put it in the oven and take any remaining nutrient out of it and put canola oil on it. And why are we sick? I don't know what's wrong.
We are completely responsible for creating good or ill health ourselves. First of all, the basic stuff. Most people don't have a good diet. Most people have giant nutritional deficiencies. They eat too much sugar. They don't exercise enough. They don't take care of the body itself. And that's a huge element of disease. And also, we have created a very toxic environment that people ignore, essentially. They ignore the fact that they're eating pesticides instead of eating organic food, or they live in dangerous areas where they're inhaling a lot of toxicity. They don't purify their water. They don't do all of those things. They don't detoxify themselves enough. They don't go through detox regimes. So we do all of that. But I think one of the biggest reasons is toxic thoughts. I really believe that what we think and how we feel is the most important reason we get ill or we get well.
Of course we do. So I think a good way, or a way I like to look at this, is to go back to one of the 7 Hermetic laws, the law of cause and effect. And of course, this is something that we're all aware of on some level, but we just seldomly apply it to real-world situations. But essentially it states that, for every effect there's a cause, and every cause has an effect. And the same thing is true with our health. So if we experience difficulties in our health, and whether you want to call it illness or disease or, simply a problem, it has a cause. And almost always the cause is something that we did.
When I found myself facing cancer, the first thing I realized was that I had created this. I don't know how I created this. It didn't really matter at that moment. It was like, all I knew was that I was the creator of my own life story. And there's nobody else creating my life story for me. And I realized that if I had created it, I could also uncreate it. So my entire approach was, how did I create this? So let me figure this out. Let me learn how I created this so I can start uncreating this.
How does our current society promote sickness, and why? This is a question that I want answers to.
I do believe our current society does promote sickness. If I were to venture guesses as to why, it's because there's money involved. People like money. And unfortunately, some people seem to like money more than they like people. Good health isn't super profitable. To my knowledge, there's never been a 20,000% markup on advising someone to drink clean water. It's hard to have an immense amount of profit on sleep. So I've never heard of the sleep industrial complex. I've heard of the food industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex. And while I think there's good aspects in those complexes, they're nonetheless industries. And an industry isn't a very good industry if it doesn't have profit as one of its principles.
Where we are now in American culture was based on the Carnegie, Rockefeller, Morgan, Chase, all of the big families the robber barons, the banksters, they had colluded and made decisions that their conventional suppressive system was the way. And because they were so well funded and had so much money, I think really no one should have had that much money at that time, because automatically that is going to lead to corruption. And I think our forefathers might have made a mistake when they didn't allow for that sort of protection of the people against those who want to control.
Around the same time that John D. Rockefeller seized U.S. media, he also hijacked U.S. medicine. When it was discovered that drugs could be produced from petroleum, America's top oil mogul ordered his army of propagandists to invert reality accordingly. Medicines used for thousands of years were suddenly classified as alternative, while the new, petroleum-based, highly addictive, and patentable drugs were declared the gold standard. After buying the German pharmaceutical company that manufactured chemicals of war for Adolf Hitler, Rockefeller leveraged his political influence by pressing Congress to declare natural healing modalities unscientific quackery. Rockefeller then took control of the American Medical Association and began offering massive grants to top medical schools under the mandate that only his approved curriculum be taught.
There I go for the benefit of the sick.
Any mention of the healing powers of herbs, plants, and diet was erased from most medical textbooks. Doctors and professors who objected to Rockefeller's plan were crucified by the media, removed from the AMA, and stripped of their license to teach and practice medicine. Those who dared to speak out were arrested and jailed. When evidence began to emerge that petroleum-based medicines were causing cancer, Mr. Rockefeller founded the American Cancer Society, through which he suppressed that information. John D. Rockefeller is duly credited as the founder of the pharmaceutical industry, and the reason that medical error is currently the third leading cause of death in America. This is not an indictment against doctors. More than anyone, they are under the stranglehold of the single largest lobbying power in Washington. Every year, the pharmaceutical industry spends at least twice the amount as big oil to influence laws, policies, and public perception. Thanks to Mr. Rockefeller, the architect of American monopolies, no industry has more power over our lives than Big Pharma.
For the majority of people, it's a habit, not necessarily wanting to be sick, right? Everybody at the end of the day wants the same thing. They want to be healthy. They want to enjoy their life. They want to have enough money so they can do what they really want to do for themselves and their family. So it doesn't matter whether you're left, right, red, blue, from India or from Canada or US. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing. However, we have been conditioned through generations and generations and generations that we are not in control, and to some degree that's true, but that we don't have a say in what happens to us.
We have been trained to not know how to think, and to think in I would say, a delusional, make-believe way.
It's what we do. It's what we do. It's all just, it's programming.
If you turn on the TV, every other commercial, ask your doctor, is this pill right for you? Do you have these symptoms? Oh, if you have these symptoms, you better go and ask your doctor. Find out what's wrong with you. Maybe this purple pill or this yellow pill or this blue-green pill with stripes on it is going to help you. That's your answer. Go ask your doctor. Find out.
You know, as far as the motivations of, why is it that we are believing this still? Well, our media is very, very, let's just say, leading. And so we're now stuck to our screens. Some people 24/7. I really like my cell phone, I gotta tell you. But it's a nice tool, right? And but we see it in our faces all the time. Consume, do this, and you'll be happy, and eat this, or take this, or, all this kind of stuff. So these messages are there. And I understand, people want to make money. I get that. And it does take that awareness, self-awareness, to realize that this is not going to fix your life. But sometimes people have to be at I call it the dark night of the soul, the bottom of the abyss, in order to look for something different. I had to, for sure. So if that is what it is, that's okay.
It promotes sickness for money. And I don't think that that's any a surprise to anybody. Honestly, anybody watching this particular series or film or whatever, raise your hand if you if you think something's amiss here with the drug companies. And what's amiss here is that you have them keeping us sick for money. That's not a question anymore. I think that most people understand that there's an agenda. Do you remember what the public did with the tobacco company when they found out that they knew it caused cancer and they still were going ahead to promoting cartoons to addict the kids? That was unconscionable for the American public, and that was starting with the downfall of smoking. You're going to see the same thing start up soon about the ones who are making millions of dollars and know better on the things that they've developed that we really don't need.
Our bodies are naturally immune. Our minds are not. We are creating thoughts. We are bringing thoughts into physical form. So what we are doing is we are literally embodying, making physical thought patterns. So physical little microorganisms actually are not transmissible from person to person, but thoughts are. Thought viruses is what's happening. Thought viruses of fear, doubt, worry. You're not okay. You better protect yourself. Do this or your grandmother's going to die. Right? This is what's happening, these thought patterns. And when we believe that if we don't do something and our grandmother's going to die because we didn't do something, that's a pretty distorted thought pattern. But then we live it out and we live and we live and our bodies get more and more distorted. And then the distortion shows up as a physical symptom and we go, oh no, there's something wrong with me. Our bodies are literally on our side 24/7. They're designed to function for as long as they can possibly be here. We're not being attacked by viruses. We're being attacked by thought viruses. We need to start seeing how energy works.
How can one avoid receiving a diagnosis?
So the best way to avoid a medical diagnosis is don't go to the doctor. And that'll work probably 98% of the time.
Routine tests oftentimes give you diagnoses that are either untrue or nothing to worry about.
If you go to a nutritionist, you're going to find you've probably got some vitamins missing or some sort of dietary imbalance. If you go to a orthopedic surgeon, you're probably going to have an organ that you have that's excess. If you go to a chiropractor, you probably have subluxations. If you go to a physician, you'll probably have a deficiency of drugs. If you go to a different specialist, whatever their specialty is what you're going to get. If you go to whatever specialty you do, you're going to have that issue because they're filtering their world through those eyes. So the question is if you're going to get a diagnosis, if you actually went and got the diagnosis from somebody and then took that diagnosis and went to another professional, they've done this. They've done studies on this. You might get multiple diagnoses. You might not get the same diagnosis multiple times. And this is very commonly. So I like to play on words. Diagnosis means dia, which means through, and gnosis, which means knowledge. But you could also reframe that as diagnosis, two people who don't know. If you're going to go for a diagnosis, beware that who you go to as a specialist, you're going to get their specialty. And so it may be wise to go to somebody who's more of a general practitioner to start the ball rolling, who's not attached to their specialty, and might go and get at least 2 or 3 opinions, particularly if it's something really concerning.
I would definitely get multiple diagnoses. I would also look in the natural health world for technologies that are not technically FDA approved as diagnostic machines, but in reality are much more indicative a lot of times of your health status, like quantum biofeedback. I mean, it's unbelievable what it can see and tell is going on. So you can, at the very least, use that as a screening tool to point you in the right direction.
What I do personally is I don't put all of my power into anyone. If we deify someone and stop listening to our true selves, our gut, our intuition, therefore you're putting it over into someone else who's sponsored and paid for, and they're not always going to have your best interest at heart.
How does one avoid a medical diagnosis? Well, here's the thing. I talked about how once we have a diagnosis, sometimes we end up with what I call a label. Once we have a label, then our thought process goes, oh, I have this thing. We literally attach ourselves and our consciousness to this label, and then we look up the label, and I'm talking about the average person. I don't do this now, but we look up the label and we now look on the internet and go, oh my gosh, these are all the symptoms that I'm gonna get, right? And then the mind goes, really? And then the universe goes, okay.
I had an interesting conversation with somebody on my podcast, actually, that diagnoses should be illegal. Now, it's a pretty far out concept because without the knowledge, you obviously can't change things. But the idea being that in the Western medical construct, a diagnosis is kind of like handing someone their death certificate in many ways. When you give someone a diagnosis of something, a set of belief systems are installed in that particular moment, or a set of belief systems are triggered. And so for many people, that trigger is, it's over. I'm dying. And there's like this energetic surrender, or like they're giving up to the process.
Number one, you want to be careful about what you're putting into your mouth. The old saying is that most people dig their grave with their teeth. And unfortunately, that's true in so many cases. Try to limit foods that have labels. In other words, if that food that you're about to eat needs a label to tell you what's actually in it, and if some of those words you don't recognize and some of them you can't pronounce, they're probably not going to be good for you.
We can start shifting our diets to just stuff that came from the farm, whether it's meat, vegetables, nuts, seeds, that type of thing. My diet philosophy is JERF, just eat real food.
If you want to live as long as you possibly can live and avoid a diagnosis, I think it's very important to start getting rid of your emotional baggage. Find a method. The emotion code is easy. There are other methods out there as well.
Look at how you're living. Knowing you have to know that your ability to change your biochemistry can happen right now from different choices, from seeing things differently, from self-generating a different emotional state. Always start with the power you have within you. So how you avoid the medical diagnoses is to first know that you have power to shift your pattern right now. We can change our patterns. And with that understanding, look at the patterns of your life. What do I need to shift?
Instead of entering the sick world and then finding a solution to it, just play in the game of how expansive and how healthy can I get? Just start to think that. How healthy could I get?
The real question that would benefit us to be asking is, what do I do to maintain ideal health? What do I do to live in vitality? What do I do to live in the highest level of vibrance, strength, and resilience that is available to me? And so as soon as we begin asking that question, even if you just, feel your body for a moment and kind of soften your body and take a breath, as you hear that question, what would create the most highest level of vitality, of joy, resilience, and strength for me in my life? Just the frequency of the question begins to give you a shift in your electromagnetics, a shift in your physiology, a shift in your brain patterning, because now your focus is in a different thread, in a different frequency. And what you focus on expands. Your cells are listening.
One can avoid a medical diagnosis by not going to the doctor, by starting to understand how your thoughts are directly impacting your physicalness. You are the master of your own molecules. And when you are guiding your molecules in the direction of fear and guilt and shame and worry, that's a distortion. You're simply leading your body down that road. The mental health comes first. The mental and emotional health comes first. Then the physical follows. So if you are in a physical situation, you need to guide your body back into alignment through your emotional state, getting your thoughts and your emotions back into alignment. That's where your power lies.
The next question is one that I need to know the answer to. Pharmaceutical industry, food industry, are they connected?
The pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, the government industry, the religious industries, these are all societies. The legal society, all of it is connected. All of these people that are making the biggest decisions on our planet, they are all connected. They're all working from the same page.
A lot of the things that people consume and call food are really not even food. So the problem is that there is this kind of incestuous relationship between big pharma and big food. And whether this is on purpose or not, I personally don't know. But I do know that the more junk food, for example, that people eat, the more processed food that people eat, the more likely they are to become ill. Now, when they become ill, what happens? Well, the food is never actually discovered to be the actual problem. Instead, what happens is Big Pharma runs to the rescue and says, oh, you need these drugs. And so there is this incestuous kind of relationship going on where the more bad food, the more processed food people eat, the more drugs they need. Now, whether there's collusion there or not, I don't know, but there definitely is a relationship.
It's one and the same. And as a background in agricultural biotechnology, that's my Bachelor of Science, I know that what we were doing in the lab was trying to alter food in, using genetics and the way we grow food, the way we pour all these chemicals onto the food. is so dangerous. It's so irresponsible. What humanity has done is so irresponsible.
Many of the giant conglomerates have their hand in various things. They have their hand in the pharmaceutical industry. They have their hand in big food. They have their hand in the media. So they own all of these things and control the narrative that way.
Now we're at the point where a research study that came out last year for the US found that the average US citizen was eating between 6 and 11 times a day. And if you're eating 11 times a day, to me, it's just once. You just never stop. So along this journey, people are getting sick. So big pharma's obviously in this situation where they're getting an increase in revenue because hospitals are filling up. Diseases that they've never heard of over this period of time are coming out in large numbers. The American Heart Association literally overnight went from not really being a big organization. It was an office with a couple of doctors for the first 10, 20 years. And then out of nowhere is this multi-million-dollar industry that's governing what needs to be classified as heart-healthy food. And if you ask me, I'm yet to see a heart-healthy food with the Heart Association tick on it. Those two worlds don't go together very well, in my opinion. But so this is kind of the process. And so obviously the pharmaceutical industry is seeing an increase in its clientele because of the way that the food industry is working. So we've got these two industries. One's creating the problem. One's quote unquote solving the problem. And it's this never ending cycle. And this is another reason that motivated me to leave the hospital, is because I realized in a cancer setting, when you walk in the door once, you've just started. It's a revolving door, because you go into the hospital to get the medical solution. And actually, in some instances, it works, right? The problem is you go back to the food that you eat at home. You go back to the food, the lifestyle, the beliefs, the energy, the toxins, all of the things at home that created the problem. And this was the real first light bulb for me. And so I realized that this was like an industry that was feeding each other. It was the food industry and the ag industry that were influencing governments and influencing the education bodies of medicine, nutritionists, dietitians, in order to give people advice about the way they manage their disease based on the financial interests of big ag, which aren't really that useful because they still produce the problem over here. And so you've got to go to the hospital to get these solutions. And because they're suggesting grain-based solutions, we're in this cycle forever. And I know this because got a nutrition degree. And there's been so much stuff that I learned where I was like, I'm going to remember this for an assignment, or I'm going to look up some research for an assignment. I will never tell somebody to do this, ever.
You know, watching these documentaries, reading these so-called alternative books, I realized that there is an incredible connection between the pharmaceuticals, the chemical industry, the food industry, and it seems, at least on the surface, that it's not for our health. And even our food, they called it the food pyramid before, the best diet, which changes over the years. I thought it was based on science. I thought it was based on clinical evidence, but I had no idea it was based on lobbying. It was based on industry, money, whatever. And so that was a big wake-up call for me as well.
I see it as one. I don't see the food and the drug thing as separate. In fact, they're trying to make it even more one by vaccines in your cereal kind of stuff. They did that a little bit slippery slope with the nutraceuticals, right? Like you can get your cod liver oil in your milk, or all the omegas and all the added vitamin C's. They've been trying to already push us into that thinking, and they're going to take over all the supplement companies too. I've watched that happen. I've witnessed buying up companies that I used to trust and really love and use, adding things in that never were there before. You have to watch everything, even with food that's greenwashed. You have to be very careful. They'll sneak in little stuff and wasn't there when you first read the ingredients.
I saw a video recently, and it's a classical video. You can go online and get it, where showing that chickens, the way they're raised, they're literally grown with various hormones to such a degree that they can't even stand up. But they grow amazing breast size with these ratios of estrogens and progesterones and things. They're creating this high breast side because people want white meat on a chicken. And so the pharmaceutical industry that's making estrogen is actually in cahoots with the food growers, because they can grow food in a third the time and make more white meat, which is more popular, and less bones, and they're less hard bones, and it's easier to remove it when it's cooked. So they're making it that way. The same thing for cows. They fatten them up with corn and also with hormones to make sure they get a lot of fluid in them, to make sure that they get more weight and sell. I do believe that the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry are definitely entwined.
There's a huge budget of, for example, in the U.S., the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, that is paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. So it's sort of like that saying of the fox guarding the hen house. It's like, how are you supposed to protect consumers when you're getting paid by the people that you're supposed to be checking up on?
Are the pharmaceutical industries and the food industries connected? I think very much so, because they both rely on the same people to fund them. And the pharmaceutical industry and food industry are both industries. So they're very much connected by that common denominator of being industries. And then when I look at it, and I don't get conspiratorial, but I get just, realistic, it seems as though most of the food industry isn't supplying healthy, nourishing food. A lot of it is low vitality garbage, laden with sugar, laden with chemicals, laden with harmful seed oils that degrade vitality, cause a lot of inflammation in the body. Shockingly, the pharmaceutical industry makes a lot of products that help cater to those very conditions. So it looks like they're marching to the beat of the same drum.
I was told by a gentleman one time, if you eat things that were grown and produced and manufactured by people in white coats, it'll probably lead you back to people in white coats. So don't feed your body something that's not wise to eat. Don't live to eat to live. Eat to perform and maximize your potential so you can fulfill your mission on earth. And to eat something that's grown naturally, if possible, and grown with wholesomeness instead of something that's artificial.
Closer to nature, the better. And we have to just stop assuming that somebody else has got our back. We have to have our backs, right? And other like-minded folks.
Before the pharmaceutical industry came in and took over, we actually used plants and nature to heal. So I asked the experts to speak directly to supplements and natural remedies.
The goal should be, if you're using a supplement and so forth, understand that it's not about a quick cure. If you're trying to find relief from something, I totally understand. But I bet you everyone listening to this could go into their kitchen or wherever their supplement closet is and pull out a bunch of stuff that they never use anymore, that they don't know what it's for even, that they only took a little bit because they weren't dedicated enough to what they were doing it for. And how many times have people come to me with bags of supplements and sat them down in front of me, and I went through every single one of them and told them, garbage, garbage, garbage. They've got FD&C red in that one. You've got all kinds of fillers in that one. That's garbage. That's garbage. That's garbage. Okay, this is a good one. This is like a Whole Foods one, or this one I trust. I know this professional company. I've met the CEO. I understand their ethics. I understand their science. That's a good one. Keep that one. And here's how you use it from beginning to end. And you must be disciplined, and you must be doing it every day, or don't bother.
Why would God, the creator, the higher source, not come up with all these natural remedies that people have been using for Ayurveda? It's a 5,000-year-old traditional. There's Amalaki. There's things like the anti-inflammatories, which is a huge problem that we have, is inflammation. So why do we have to go to a chemical when we could go to natural supplements? It doesn't make any sense, but they have all the money to bombard our minds with this is your only answer. We're a quick fix society when health is not a quick fix.
The pharmaceutical industry has, and other industries have done their best to make natural supplements unavailable and obscure to people, so you can't tell the truth about a natural supplement. You can't tell the truth about what it can do. You have to play all these word games and that kind of stuff. And so it's amazing that the natural health industry is doing as well as it is. It's outgrowing the pharmaceutical industry by far because people intuitively realize, and they know from experience. It's like, oh, I did this drug for this thing and it didn't work. I did this herb for this thing and it did work.
Natural remedies, that's what everything should be based on. That's what medicine and all of it should be based on, is natural remedies. We should start there and only depart from that or think outside of that when it's absolutely the last resort, in my opinion. We shouldn't need supplements. We should be able to derive our proteins and everything that's important to our evolutionary process should all be provided from our environment. But because we have done such great damage to our environment, because our water is not pure, because our air is polluted, because our soil is polluted, because our food has all kinds of synthetic additives in them, we have to counter that with supplements.
What you may need is different from what I may need. And that's where a very good practitioner, integrative practitioner or naturopath comes in, because they can give you some tests and tell you what supplements you need to be well.
The best supplements come from food. Food is really, I think, how we're intended to consume our vitamins and our minerals. And so supplements that are based on whole foods, I think, are typically the best.
I think that it's a beautiful stage for people to go through, especially if they're brand new, right? If they're just brand new and they're open to diet changes, to supplements, that may be a really, really good next step for them based on their consciousness. They may not be able to jump from level 1 to 3 to, medications to I create my reality, right? It's kind of a big jump. So supplements would be kind of partway there. And it can make a difference if used judiciously.
I always phrase this as one tweak a week. You want to move towards your healthy outcome, one tweak a week. You want to master that step one, whether that be making sure you get your bare feet on the earth every day, or whether that being like one meal a day, I'm going to make sure has 5 vegetables in it. Get that normal, make that a normal thing, and then move on to the next step.
Herbs are living things. They work with the body, as opposed to a drug that if you've got a symptom, the drug is going to put a Band-Aid on the symptom and oftentimes cause a side effect. If you give the body an herb, the herb will go into the body and it will kind of talk to your cells and will be like, hey, what do you need? You need this? Great. If you don't need this, I won't give you. So there's this beautiful relationship that occurs when you're using natural plant medicine. Supplements they're not always just plants. They can be, high dose nutrients or, homeopathic. So there's other things that can go on. And as long as they are what your body needs, they can be tremendous. The cool thing about, not using supplements is, if you have a meditation practice or a breath work or a prayer practice, those are free. You can do them anywhere and they're going to be, in my opinion, more effective sometimes than a supplement. I mean, again, I'm a fan of them, but I think that if you do them in the absence of those other things, they'll only get you so far.
It didn't really do as much as I thought it was going to do. Yes, I was spending hundreds of dollars a month on the supplements. And certain ones, at least as a medical doctor and reading the research, like magnesium, I'm like, OMG, how did I not know magnesium's important for 325 plus enzymatic reactions in the body? And that, people with heart attack could save their myocardium, which is their heart muscle, if they just take magnesium.
Anytime we take in nature, natural foods, organic foods, fresh grown foods, or like foods grown with love from maybe it's a farm or a more pure source, it really enlivens the body. The body is nature, and it enlivens with nature.
One of the natural supplements is water. I learned how to love, embrace, and use water to heal me. People say, hey, would you like a cup of coffee? No, I've never had a cup of coffee. How do you stay awake? Because the water, we're 75% water, our bodies. I visualize the water doing for me what I need to be done. It wakes me up because it's literally purifying me. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. We drink caffeine and sugary drinks and things like that. I just drink water all the time. And got to pee a lot, but still, it's so good for me.
There are things that are from the earth that are designed to help us. For instance, if I just recently learned, not through direct experience, fortunately, but if you get poison ivy, literally the antidote is growing right next to the poison ivy. So the earth is designed as the Garden of Eden. It literally gives us everything we need. Everything we need for survival and thrival is right here.
As I got deeper into my conversations with these doctors and healers, there was another question that needed to be asked. What is a virus? And do viruses even exist? I wanted to connect with the leading authorities on this important matter, so I visited Dr. Tom Cowan, who took me on a tour of his garden. I went to see Dr. Andrew Kaufman, who shared about his research and conclusions. And I explored this question with many of the others as well.
There's an entire school of thought that say that viruses exist within us, and it depends on the state of the terrain as to whether or not they manifest as illness.
From what I understand, viruses are not alive bacteria that are hunting us down.
So the idea that a virus is a bad thing or the cause of all illness may not be the factor.
I think the most important thing, irrelevant of whether viruses do or don't exist, is the condition of the body, the terrain theory.
Because I don't think anybody's ever isolated, certainly not COVID, and I don't know if they've isolated any viruses.
You know, and I have talked to people who have said, for instance, that they've requested a pure sample of the COVID isolated virus. And so far, everybody that I've talked to said they haven't been able to get one.
You know, even virologists and world-renowned Nobel Prize-winning virologists will disagree with each other over, you know, is a virus a life form? Is it not a life form? Is it kind of like a computer program? Do they even exist?
So there is this doctor, Dr. Stefan Lanka, who was a virologist, like a historian. He searched looking for the virus. And he's not even calling himself a virologist historian anymore because he's like, search is over. There's no virus.
There has been enough really well-educated, super smart people that have debated this issue. And I think if you're looking at it with an open mind, you've got to ask some questions. You've got to ask some questions and be ready for some maybe alternative answers to show up in the future.
Have viruses been proven to exist?
I'm often asked, why is this an important or relevant question at all, right? Because most of the people in the truth movement can see that there's tyranny going on, right? They can see that the policies of the health establishment are not warranted based on the, epidemiologic data, which is not very reliable. But, we just walk around and know people aren't dropping dead in the streets.
No, they have not. Not by the scientific standards that we are supposed to be supporting, meaning, the scientific method.
A virus is meant to be a particle, an actual thing. It's not an idea. It's not a feeling. It's not something you thought of. It's meant to be a actual physical particle that uses other living tissue to self-replicate, and through the process of self-replicating causes disease. That's what is commonly meant by a virus. Certainly a pathogenic virus, which is the viruses that we're interested in. According to that definition, it is extremely clear that there has never been a particle that has met that definition.
The shocking part when I talked about the Rockefeller medicine system, how this came to be is by manipulating or massaging the hypothesis and doing statistical data selection to create the end goal to prove your hypothesis as a yes. Meaning it's not pure science. What has happened is manipulative science.
Thinking that there's something causing a disease, you have to know, first of all, if that thing is actually a thing, if it even exists. And this is really, you could call it epistemology, but we can't understand anything unless we first ask the question, what is the question we're asking? And what is going on? Where do we start to answer this question?
If I asked any virologist the question, or any scientist, any medical doctor, or anybody, has this particle that we just defined ever been found directly in any tissue, bodily fluid, feces, urine, spit, semen, anything of any plant, animal, or human being? In any case, rabies, measles, Ebola, Zika, COVID, the answer is no. Period. Everybody agrees with that.
When we peer back into history, we see that this was an idea that was born. The germ theory was an idea, and it had to be fought to actually even be predominant. It took 40 years of arguments with scientists saying, well, no, germs don't cause disease. There's no one germ, one disease. And we're not just talking about viruses. We're talking about bacteria, fungus, all the things that we think cause disease. We've been mistaken on the process and how our body actually works and what germs really are. It's like the Renaissance again. We have to understand that we've been hoodwinked into a germ theory ideology that is false. And if you had a germ that caused a disease, then it should be very easy to prove that it is so. For example, the experiments they did back in the time of the Spanish flu, where they tried to make people sick. So you had those who claimed they were ill with the respiratory issue, coughing on people, spitting and exchanging fluids, swallowing, injecting. They did these experiments and they found no contagion. Now, you would think that if there was a virus that's claiming to cause so much death and destruction, that it would be easy for a contagion. However, that's not the case at all.
So you can't know anything about the situation with a pandemic unless you start at the beginning. And if they say that it's all caused by a virus, then you have to look there first.
If you read method sections of any of the papers, it's what I really encourage people to do. And I know it's tough to read a lot of these papers. They have large language or language you might not understand. Do it anyway and just try to piece it out. And you realize that no one has really seen these particles. No one has studied what happens in the living body. Everything has been taken away from life and put in a petri dish and altered. The results of the alteration are then put into the papers without doing proper science, which would have a control that would say what happens when we don't put it in that medium, or what happens if we do witness what's going on in the living body and see if it correlates with what happens outside the living body. And that's not done. Hasn't been done.
So I've exhaustively looked there at the primary evidence. What is the evidence that they've actually identified or discovered some entity, a particle, right? Because this is another part of it, is that you have to know when you say virus, what are you talking about? So my definition would be a particle that has some kind of shell or membrane, and inside of it has contents that include genetic material. and that this thing in and of itself can't do anything, but it can, when it comes in contact with certain types of cells of a host, like a human, like lung cells, that it can invade those cells and use the cells' machines to make copies of itself. And in the process, it then explodes the cell and spreads to other cells and manufactures itself. Okay, that's called being replication competent. So it's a particle, has genetic material, it's replication competent, and it is alleged to cause a disease. So this is distinct from other particles that may have genetic material and may be able to replicate, like bacteriophages. Those are real. Okay, I have looked at the science and I can see that they actually can reproducibly find these things. They can show pictures of them by themselves. They all look identical. They're identical size and shape. They have very unique characteristic shapes, not just a round blob, but they actually look like strange alien, spaceships or something like that, bacteriophages. And also exosomes are also real. And those are, in the size and shape, identical to what they say viruses are, but they're essentially produced by our own cells. They butt off our own cells when they're all the time, but more so when we are poisoned or ill or have cancer or these kinds of things. And they have actually shown those things to exist. They've discovered them by, the straightforward, simple method. So I'm not talking about those. I'm only talking about the ones they say cause a human disease, so like herpes virus, coronaviruses, hantavirus, HIV, all these viruses. But, specifically the first one I looked at was the alleged SARS-CoV-2 associated, with the alleged COVID-19.
And in fact, we now have over 200 Freedom of Information requests from the CDC and the NIH, et cetera. Have you ever found this particle, like SARS-CoV-2, that's the virus, in a person you say has COVID? Without doing anything else, just looking for it. Answer, no, we have no paper.
So what the case is that there simply is no scientific evidence of the existence of these particles. They just have not been shown to exist by any rational, reproducible means using the scientific method. So therefore, they can't cause a disease. So there can't be a new disease based on that, right? If there's no virus to speak of. And
it's a huge can of worms in and of itself, because when you realize this fraud, it shakes a lot of your core awareness of this world. And I think it can be challenging for a lot of people because they think they know. Like they think they know because an uncle had polio, so that means they're right? But they had polio, because of DDT spraying and pesticide poisoning, but not from a virus. And as I help people understand, is everything's been inverted in this place. So the germs are the result of a disease process, of a breakdown process. So you will find germs at the scene because they are assisting the removal of wastes, as germs do in nature. They will break things back down into nature. So if you are the living dead, meaning you have a lot of rotting tissue, damaged tissue, then you will be infected. You will have life there helping you to remove the wastes. But they didn't cause the wastes at all. They just happened to be there, but got blamed for it. It's like blaming the flies for causing the garbage, or blaming the firemen for causing the fire because they're found at the scene, right? So once we understand the inversion that's been done to us, we can flip it around, make the corrections, and not live in fear of the germ anymore.
So the next question that I've asked all of these experts, all of these doctors, is where does Western medicine have its place?
Medical model is great for emergency medicine. It's spectacular for that. But for diagnosing what's wrong with us, it's not helpful in any way, shape, or form, because there's literally nothing wrong with us. And we have to start to understand that there is a lot of money being made by our illness, by telling us a story of this is what's wrong with you, and here's the fix. Take these pills. So we have to start to just simply understand that story is being generated from this lower frequency bandwidth. And that's the only story that can be generated with regard to what's happening with our bodies. When we start to move up into a higher bandwidth and we start to see, wait a second, our bodies are built for survival. Our bodies are built to help us in every single moment of every single day. We start to look differently. And we start to just simply not play in that bandwidth anymore of what's wrong with me. And we just start to see, oh, hey, my body's sending me a message. My body's showing me where my thoughts are out of alignment with the truth of who I am.
Like I say, if you are bleeding or you got a knife stuck in your leg and your friend can't take it out and you need stitches or you got something in your eye, or you have a situation and you need to have information like a test, like an x-ray, what is my bone broken? I think you have to learn to be a patient, and that's mostly by not going in with open-ended, what do you think is wrong with me, or how do I improve my health? There's nothing to ask a doctor about health. They don't know anything about health. They know about, is your bone broken?
I always see health as like a pie, and there's all these slices in the pie. And the conventional piece of pie that's delicious enough still to eat would be the emergency medicine and the diagnostic aspects. But keep in mind that they have teased everything out. So we had a holism, and they teased it all out into all of these areas and specialties. Now that's fine. Okay, sure. Now let's come back. Come on back. Now let's bring it back to whole again. What have we learned? Oh, this. Oh, now what can we take from this, from Ayurvedic knowledge? Oh, that works. Oh, you know what we learned? We learned that we don't need dangerous anesthesia. We can use acupuncture to get someone into a relaxed state where they don't feel pain. This sort of thing, right? Now we need to bring it home and integrate and throw the things out that don't work and keep the things that do. And that's why, in my visioning, because we're part of this, right? Our thought forms and our behavior, our way begets creation, is part of creation. I mean, we've been gifted with some touch from the Creator where we can make some changes in our lives and create some things. So I prefer to envision it coming like this. And it's messy, and it's okay. How do you move a house? It gets messy. You have to pack, you have to clean. It's a messy process.
The cat is out of the bag. Energy medicine is the future. I like to say that the emotion code, the body code are the future of energy medicine because they make it so simple and so easy that anybody can do it. But the future is really very bright. And I see cooperation in the future between the Western medical, world and the world of energy healing. In fact, we're seeing that happen more and more now. More and more hospitals are bringing in alternative forms of healing because they're finding out that, gee, these actually work. Maybe we should use these.
But I see sometimes people going to a doctor and getting a series of drugs, and it's supposedly a science, and then it gives them side effects. They go, well, that didn't work, and then they just give them another drug. We'll try this one. And I think, well, that's not exactly the science that I thought it was. I've had in my clinic people coming in with 27 medications and more. Literally, they have to have a case to carry all their drugs. And I'm thinking, my God, they're taking something that's for blood pressure, and then they're finding out that that's causing this symptom, and then they're taking something for that symptom, and then that's causing constipation. Now they're taking something for the constipation, and now they got hemorrhoids, and they're taking something for that, and it goes on and on and on and on, and it's just chasing symptoms around all over the place, and it's all palliative care, and none of it's curative. None of it is actually preventive. So medicine has a place. It is there for acute conditions, acute infections, acute injuries, acute traumas, very serious illnesses that can be life-threatening. Man, that's the place to go.
Yeah, I typically look at Western medicine's best place is with acute care, specifically like trauma. You get into a car accident, now's probably not the time to call your local essential oil salesman and your downline. It's like, I've got my femur, it's a compound fracture. It's coming through my skin. I'm getting a little lightheaded. It's really gross to look at. But is this lavender? Should I do lavender? Probably not the time for the natural remedies in the acute care situation. So the traumatic things, car accidents, broken bones, I want a Western doctor.
And if, God forbid, there's some accident where you break a bone and it's sticking out of your body and, you can't manage it on your own. And I think there is utility in the healthcare system in some of these, in serious trauma, in malformations and reconstructive surgery, right? That can make huge positive benefits, but it's only a tiny fraction of the overall medical care.
I see the place of Western medical research, and I guess, as a medical tool, as being emergency medicine is really, really good. It's fantastic for emergency medicine. Anything that needs to happen instantaneously in order to save life or repair something that's, threatening life is really important. And also to uncover all of the truths of the past. One thing that I found interesting working in a research team was that I started realizing that different parts of medicine, medical research that aren't put in the news we're just proving old wives' tales to be true. And so there's loads of information about Chinese medicine, scientific studies. There's loads of food as medicine and like turmeric and cancer. There's 6,000 turmeric and cancer studies. It's absolutely phenomenal. And so it's just not of utility to big pharma, so it doesn't end up in the media. It doesn't end up in education.
In my opinion, there is a time and a place for it. And usually it's when you've exhausted some of the other options. You've already done a meditation practice. You have your connection with source. Maybe you get an answer from source that says, hey, I think you might need to take this drug for a while, or you might need to go see this doctor, or you need surgery to have something removed. So there is definitely a time and a place. And I think as long as you're in connection with yourself, in connection with a higher power, and working with a really good practitioner who's open-minded on all fronts, because I sometimes think in the alternative medicine community, we're so hating on Western medicine. And granted, there's a lot of things that Western medicine doesn't do well. But I think if you're truly going to be open-minded, you will realize that, again, there is a time and place for that.
Well, Western medicine is not the bad guy here. We just have to understand its limits. So Western medicine is fantastic at technological advances and diagnostics to the degree that it's helpful for the person to know what's going on, as well as in emergencies. For chronic disease, we have a very, very dismal, let's just say, approval rating. We don't really do that well. So unfortunately, the war on cancer has brought more and more cancer. I'm not saying it's because of that, but it hasn't really worked. And we have more chronic disease than ever before. We have increasing obesity, increasing autism, increasing heart disease, you name it, we have it. So there was something missing.
5 years ago, my partner Christy was pregnant, and we were very vulnerable about it. At the time, Christy, who had been raw vegan, was pregnant at 46 on her first try. No problem getting pregnant. Her body is so healthy because she's been raw vegan for, at that point, 11 years, something like that, and had been, eating only amazing healthy food every single day, which had helped her heal a lot of different things in her life. She used to be sicker, and then she ate raw vegan food and got healthier. And when she got pregnant, of course, because she was 46, we still had this vulnerability and we still were worried and didn't know. And she took a test that draws her blood, and tells us if there's anything wrong with the baby. And they don't know the specifics of what this means, but it came in with a thing called monosomy, which means they're seeing in one thing that there was only one chromosome where there should have been two. And, you know, the midwife that had drawn the blood told us, you know, this could be anything. We don't know what it is. It could be something in Christy. It could be it could be in the placenta. It could be a fibroid or something like that. Is that the word? Like, they were saying all these things that it could be. And when we went to a regular hospital to go have follow-up testing more, the first thing that the doctor came in and said was, all right, you have monosomy. Do you want to abort? And then they started trying to get us to abort. And they had us go to doctor after doctor, go to this room, to either abort or at least get an amnio. And they said an amnio is this thing where we put the needle into her stomach directly. And just so you know, an amnio suddenly creates a 1 in 200 chance of miscarriage. So we're in this bizarre position where we really didn't know what to do and just felt horrified, felt scared. We didn't know if there was something wrong with our baby. We didn't know anything. We didn't know if it would make it. We didn't know anything, and we were so scared. And the amount of energy that the hospital had on us to do further invasive testing or to just abort blew our mind. And honestly, there was an energy at the time where it was almost a flip of the coin. We're just, do we go for it? Do we, you know, or would it be horrible if there was a bunch of things wrong with her to bring her into this world? We just didn't know. But the hospital's energy was completely, you need to abort. It was almost like they're just, and I started realizing the hospital where we're giving birth, well, we weren't, we had a midwife, but the hospital that offers deliveries is the same place that next door they're removing bullet wounds. It's from this emergency vibration. It's this place where emergencies are happening and life is starting. It doesn't feel like it should be the same place. It's like having a wedding in a jail. It's like there's dark things happening here and we're having the start of a wonderful new thing. I don't know that next door to the bullet removal is where she should be born, right? But their energy was completely about aborting. And this caused, you know, the next several months for us to just live in perpetual fear and kind of a shame vibration from the hospital too. Like, you know, you're making a huge mistake and this could be really bad. And we just were worried the whole time. And then she gave birth in the house with no drugs, with so much pain, because Vivi her head was stuck, and so she was stuck. And Christy so heroically in the house gave birth, and there was nothing wrong, although I didn't know that. I didn't know that the baby comes out blue and their head can go back like a football. I thought Christy had an affair with Gumby, and this baby was here, and I was just like, I thought it was, you know, when you see in the like Ripley's Believe It or Not exhibit, they're like ancient skulls from, you know, 100,000. I thought we just gave birth to that. But there was this perfect girl, and it was maybe a day or two later that it really dawned on me that I had been living in terror for 4 months, that there'd be something wrong. And I think this was a moment that really helped me relieve the energy of giving so much authority to the hospitals. Giving so much, because this girl is not only fine, she's perfect. This is the most beautiful 5-year-old angel. Like, this girl comes out, right? This is the girl that the hospitals tried very hard to get us to abort. And no part of me is telling anyone else what to do with their life, but like, they were wrong. And my mom was also told to abort me, that there was something wrong with me. And I know many people that have that story. And my only point is sometimes the hospitals are wrong. And your guidance is almost always right.
Next, I asked the experts to speak to the mind-body connection.
The mind, I've been saying for years, is the final frontier. We haven't begun to scratch the surface of what is possible when we are at the helm of the wheel of this thing we call thought.
The mind-body connection. There are so many ways of explaining this. I'll explain it from a neuroscience perspective, okay? So our limbic system of our brain is our emotional center of our brain. The limbic system sends signals to our hypothalamus, which send chemicals to our whole body, our autonomic nervous system. Our emotional center of our brain and our entire body are connected, and it starts in the brain. And there's a feedback loop. The body and all of the things that it senses sends signals back up to the brain. So there's a loop that happens from the brain, the limbic system, the hypothalamus, the autonomic nervous system down into the body, and the body back up to the brain. So what we're wanting with the mind-body connection is to have signals of safety and trust and love and joy to be sent into the body so that we can create the chemistry of healing, of self-healing. And the cool thing is that we have conscious control of our limbic system. We have conscious control of the signaling that we send to our hypothalamus to make the particular biochemical cocktail of healing. And so from a science perspective, our ability to self-generate our emotional state, it has the most direct impact on the chemical state of your body. When our body is told that we are safe, that there is no threat, we start to detoxify. Our immune system comes online. We're able to digest. We're able to self-heal. Who is responsible for sending the signal of safety to our own body? It's ourselves. Who is responsible for choosing to see the good in the gratitude, even though things are not going well? It's us. And in those choices, the autonomic nervous system shifts in its function. So that's the way I describe mind-body connection from a science perspective.
Trapped emotions are the single biggest underlying cause of all kinds of things. They're the single biggest underlying cause of things like depression and anxiety and phobias and panic attacks and PTSD and eating disorders and self-sabotage. They are responsible for 90% of the physical pain that people experience. And they also are an underlying cause of every disease process that we experience as human beings. So think about that. If you've been diagnosed with a disease, I can pretty much guarantee you there is an emotional component to that disease.
Yeah, the mind-body connection of healing to me it almost like goes without saying. So I'll say it. There's a mind-body connection. And I think healing is all about unity if we oversimplify it. And the mind-body connection, in my perspective, is truly looking at just the one being that we are. And I think anytime we separate the mind from the body and pretend they're two different things, it's like we're self-diagnosing ourselves as having multiple personalities. Like, the mind is there, the body is there, and they're two different things, but they live inside this one thing of myself. So for me, that trying to differentiate them just creates more division. And when we try to do that all the time with all our healing and all of our problems, I think we make our problems worse. Because in general, I think many of our problems arise because we're divided inside.
It's really interesting that we even think of the mind and the body as separate things. Like, the way that I see it is that, like, I do this exercise with clients. I say, where is the mind? And they usually point to their head. And I'm like, where is the body? And they usually point to their torso or their chest. And I say, all of that is within the skin, right? The skin is the container for all of it. So for me, it's the mind and the body are the exact same thing.
The mind and body are nothing separate. Now, conventional medicine knows that now and has written about it for decades, but they haven't really taken it on board. And something like a doctor's prognosis or diagnosis has everything to do with whether or not a patient will get better. the thoughts they have and the thoughts their patient has is essential.
In the West, we look at everything like it's a fight. We want to fight cancer. We want to fight bacteria. We have painkillers. We give ourselves a shot. You know, all these war analogies. But he says in the East, or in these ancient philosophies, they didn't look at it like a fight, but they just look at it as rebalancing the system.
So it's really important to understand what's really driving the activity in our brain, nervous system, and body, and all the major systems is what we're feeling.
So it's no longer just mind-body. It's like the psyche, the brain, the organ, but they all run as one unit. And the psyche's in charge, our brain's just taking orders, and our body's just going, okay, we're adapting, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, and it moves right through. We don't have to do anything other than not panic and support the body.
Our body is designed to, number one, self-repair, and number two, rejuvenate.
The mind is inexorably connected to the body. The body is actually dependent on the mind and what we call the innate intelligence of the higher consciousness for survival. So one of the most fundamental things I think with healing is to begin to go into these areas of the mind that very few people tap into. And these would be the subconscious, would also be the infinite consciousness or the super consciousness that we all have access to.
Anything in the body is going to be directly connected to the mind. Our brain doesn't really know the difference between what's happening in real life or what's happening in the brain. So if anyone has ever talked to an athlete and they will visualize, winning the gold medal or winning the race, or because their brain can visualize it, they can do that. And I think with health, if our brain can understand and know that we are healthy, the body can then follow suit.
When you let go of something, the only reason you're stressing is because your mind can measure what you will lose. It can't see what you'll gain.
What's wonderful about laughter with the healing powers is it's a whole mind, body, spirit connection. Everything is in sync with one. You're removing all your fears, your doubts, your worries. You literally can't be depressed or have anxiety while you're laughing. Like, watch this. I'm depressed. In that moment, I cannot be depressed. And all the healing agents that happen to oxygenate your body when you laugh, healing endorphins are released, and stress is relieved when you laugh. And stress is a huge disease causer.
How do we steer our attention into healing and into health? We have the ability to do it, but it does require a very diligent and consistent effort to keep our hands on the wheel and not to allow some external force to take the wheel and take our lives to where they want it to go.
We are body, mind, and soul. We are the soul first and foremost. We were the soul before we came into the body. We are the soul when we leave the body. And we are the soul right here, right now. And the body and the soul are directly connected. The body is the part that is our GPS system. It is always guiding us home to the soul. The mind, however, this is the monkey wrench. This is the thing that is programmable. This is the thing where we start to take on other people's ideas, the rules that we're taught, how we're supposed to be, who we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be. And we are simply taught the ways of the world. And this is how it is. And you're just going to have to make the best of how it is. And because we are creating our reality, what we think and what we believe directly generates our experience.
Regarding healing, what can you share about connection to source energy?
There's been a term, being resourceful, which means returning to the source. And I think that being resourceful is really returning back to our authentic self, the source of our real authentic being.
I'll tell you my general opinion, certainly free of science because my mind isn't smart enough to have science in it. From a big abstract perspective, I believe healing comes from source. I don't believe healing comes from our body. I think in a good scenario, when our bodies or mind, wherever it is, when we need to heal, our body and mind allows source energy to come in.
Bringing in that source connection is so very important because it assists people, I find, into revealing maybe some of the ways and some of the reasons that that illness was created in the first place.
When we're living by what is most valuable to us, we're inspired spontaneously and we're most authentic. And that's what our symptoms are trying to get us to do, to return to the source of our own innermost, most authentic being, where we're most inspired and grateful for our life, which is a spiritual path.
We're created in the image and likeness of God, which means that we are creators because God was a creator. We have a magnificent system, but not only were we creators, we are like a chip off the old block. We're a chip of God. We're like the light of God. We're the incarnation of God in many ways. And so we have both the connection with the Spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit, but we also have this light integration experience where the light of our energetic self interfaces beautifully and perfectly. And that's kind of the overlay of God into our physical body. And such a magnificent and beautiful connection.
I do think source energy is very synonymous with healing energy. And when we allow source energy in, what we're really allowing ourselves to do is remember a more significant connection to our source, where we came from, which is what I call God.
One of the lead reasons to be on this planet over everything else. Everything else is a byproduct to it, but it's your connection to, some people call it the now, some people call it God, some people call it source, some people call it your higher self, some people call it the universe. I don't know. The way I feel it is this. There's a you that's always telling you a next step that would be expansive.
We are part of, I would say, the creative source of the universe, God, if you wish to say it. And some of the most basic scriptures say this. They say that we have the essence of God in us. If you take a look at scripture, it say made in his image. What does that mean? I think that's made in love. I think we have a piece and part of that. When we find that and find that connection, then suddenly we've got a starting point. I always go there. I drop into my heart. That's where I get my peace from. That's where I get my intuition from. It's everything to me.
And there's studies that show that in cancer patients, that people that have a belief in some type of afterlife or God or connection actually live longer in their treatment journey. So they have longer lifespans. And it gives real credence to the idea that the mind has an impact on the biological vehicle that we've got and the condition of it. And that was in my hospital journey. That was where I really started to be like, oh, that's a belief. Like and it's something I don't believe in at this particular time. And not necessarily now either, but I was like, somebody's life expectancy changes because of a thought process. And that, for me, coming back to that mind body stuff, that was where I realized, I was like, the mind is the body, because a change in the state of the mind equals a change in the abilities or capacities of the body. And that really opened Pandora's box for me as a conventional hospital scientist in Australia, being like, my mind is melting, basically.
What that means is we're living in a holographic universe. So even though this reality we're in is very solid and very real, at its fundamental components, it's made of light. And so that means that we can restructure matter from the ground up if we know how to do it, and affect healing. And so that's been my approach.
I think it's becoming clearer and clearer through not just studies we've done here, but in other studies as well, that real healing happens at the energetic level. Because it's the energetics that are really controlling, or the fields, if you want to think of it that way, the physical.
Our connection to source is unconditional. So we could
created that we're disconnected and experience life like I'm alone, I'm incapable, I'm isolated, nothing works for me, no one really cares for me. And we'll experience that reality as true. But the connection to source actually can't be severed. The source that created us is constantly moving through us, because your body is your friend. Your body is your ally to show you, hey, you're shut down. It's not serving you. It'd be a good idea to open back up. And if we listen, maybe we're not listening to those earlier signals. We're not that sensitive, but then you're like getting a diagnosis. Whoa, I have cancer. Whoa, I have autoimmune disease. Whoa, I have a bowel disorder. It could be anything. We could receive at that point. Okay, body, show me what needs to happen. How do I need to open back to source so my body has what it needs to recalibrate itself, re-energize itself, heal itself, and renew? That's the natural state of the body.
I see profound changes in patients that I work with and in people in my life who have a connection to a higher power. And not that you can't get better without that, but I think if you're in touch with that, you're going to trust that it's going to be okay. You're going to believe that your body can get better. I constantly write in my treatment plans for my patients that have an active faith practice. I'm like, pray for your symptoms. Pray for what's going on. Talk to God. Talk to the universe. Talk to source. Because if you don't ask, they can't help you. But if you ask, there's so much available to you to make you feel better.
If you just open up, the very first quote says, I didn't come to teach you. I came to love you, and love will teach you. You could also put the word heal. I didn't come to heal you. I came to love you. Love will heal you. Because I believe that your heart, your soul will guide you to all the experiences that you're meant to have. And even I think there's no accident if you're watching this right now. There's some beautiful reason. Something will come and be downloaded to you, or something will light up your heart. And it may not make sense to your mind, but it makes sense to your soul.
We are so conditioned in our environment and our programming to look outside of ourselves for the answer. And it's not wrong to ask other people. It's not wrong to ask mentors or help. But a lot of times we depend on this outside answer. And every time we have some sort of problem, we ruminate over it. Okay, how am I going to fix this? I could do this and this. And we have limited thinking. We're humans. We only know what we know and what we grew up with. So we have this programming and we have this tunnel vision of what's possible. But when we connect to source and connect to that stillness, all of a sudden, all possibilities are open. And if we just go, well, I know what I want. I know what I want solved. I don't know how. And just sit in that stillness, sit in that connection with source, the answer will come, at least in my experience and with, so many people that I've worked with. So I feel that that connection to source is absolutely the most important thing. It doesn't matter if you call it God, 0 point field, the quantum realm. It is transformational.
When I was a very, very little girl, I would have these experiences at night where I would go to bed and I would find myself floating in space as just an attention point without a body. But I was floating and I was looking at the planet from a distance. And it wasn't that I was just looking at the planet. I was actually looking at the history of humanity. I could see all of the wars that were being fought on the planet over whose God was better than whose. And as I was floating there and simply looking around in the space, there was just unconditional love. That was it. And I knew in that moment that that is all there is. It is infinite. It is eternal. It is always there. It never leaves. It never goes away. This is source itself. This is the source of all living life force energy. This is consciousness. This is the state of being that is available to all of us, to all beings, 24/7. And this is where we source our energies from, is this unconditional love.
In seeing what my aunt did in reversing the diagnosis that she was given, I thought it would be interesting to ask all of the experts, how can a diagnosed health issue be uncreated?
Well, when it comes to diagnosis, I think people should be very careful. Because sometimes the diagnosis itself is the disease. If you understand the power of placebo and nocebo, so placebo is when you're told something positive is happening, and it does. And nocebo is the opposite, when you're told something negative will happen, and it does. And a lot of our lives are lived within a nocebo mindset, where we're told this is going to affect you in your environment. And so it does. I was breathing for 70 hours plus hours, the thickest clouds of asbestos a human body could ingest. I had a little bit of a lung issue 10 years later after my experience at Ground Zero, 9/11, but I've been perfectly healthy ever since. I had a lung infection, took care of it, knocked it out, went right back to being healthy again. It was just a detox I had to do.
If we have a diagnosis, which means generally you've gone to a doctor who's given a formal diagnosis, which they've done testing and poking and prodding and this sort of thing. The first thing is to ensure you haven't attached yourself to the diagnosis. I'll see this language a lot. Well, my arthritis or my cancer or my so-and-so. That would be the first thing to just check in your mind. Are you doing that? Did you take the diagnosis very seriously? Meaning, doom and gloom sort of thinking. And because we must be careful, just in German New Medicine alone, they talk about the diagnosis itself creating a cascade to cause the very thing that they've been told they had. That's the power of our minds. It's called the nocebo effect. We must be aware to not employ the nocebo effect when we're given a diagnosis from a doctor.
Just so happens that I currently identify as a medical doctor. I think it's very helpful to self-identify with what we are rather than identifying with what we're not. What we're not is the diagnosis. That's the thing that we have. It's not us. But self-identifying as what we are, one miraculous droplet that comes from the infinite ocean of consciousness, that seems a little more true and a little more empowering about who we really are. And when we accept that as our reality, I think we become much more open to all possibilities rather than being closed down to the limitations of one possibility, the diagnosis, which happens when we self-identify as what the diagnosis is. I'm not a doctor anymore. I identify as a comedian.
If you're diagnosed with some kind of a disease process, the first thing to realize is that the power that created your body can also heal your body.
Any diagnosis, I believe, is here to wake you up to a truer essence of what you are. And maybe in some circumstances, not all, I'm not a doctor, I have to say that. But in some circumstances, those diagnoses can be uncreated.
The power that made the body is what heals the body. And our power is our own state of consciousness and our own awareness of how our psychology affects our physiology. So taking command of that is essential if we want to master the wellness factor we have within. We have an extraordinary capacity to bring wellness and healing to our body with the touch of the heart.
Every disease really that you're diagnosed with is really a symptom. It's just a symptom of other things really that are going on in the body. Remember that every disease has an emotional component. And if you don't address that, then you might do everything else right, but that disease may get the better of you.
When we bring peace to our moment, which is just, I'm willing to feel what I'm feeling now. I'm feeling fill in the blank, and I choose to love myself fully. I choose to just let myself breathe this instead of resisting it. Even just that little shift begins to open the space that massive, massive change can now come through. Because instead of holding that space of resistance, which so many people are doing with, we gotta fight cancer, we gotta fight diabetes, we're trying to fight everything. But you don't realize, like, the fight is the actual problem. It generates massive amounts of inflammation in the body, and it like puts all three nervous systems on overload, overdrive, and sending off all those stress signals that have been shown to be the primary physiology that underlies every major disease most people are dying from.
Anyone who's in this field will tell you that they've seen miracle after miracle after miracle in patients that have the mindset, basically a miracle mindset. And if you have that, and if you have love and you have faith, your body is capable of anything, whether that's going in a negative direction towards illness or going in a positive direction towards wellness.
It's going to require a little bit of research, perhaps, or listening to this documentary, perhaps, to know, number one, it's possible. You got to rethink these things, especially when you get those kinds of diagnoses and realize what's going on in your body. We have so much control over our own chemistry.
I believe in more general diagnosis. I saw this with my mother-in-law, who had supposedly end-stage breast cancer. Her general practitioner, when he discovered this very late on, where her breast essentially was like raw meat, told us we ought to get her affairs in order. She was too late for any of the conventional treatments, so we brought her to an integrative practitioner who had healed many, many cancer patients. I mean, he didn't lose many. And he examined her when I was in his office with her. And he looked at this breast, which had caused her GP to recoil. And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, we can handle that. And I knew that at that moment she was going to reverse her cancer. And she went on and did. Within about 6 weeks, her cancer was gone. He changed her diet. He gave her intravenous vitamin C and a few other things, and that was it. No chemo, no radiation, but a change of mindset. Instead of, you only have a few months here. He said, we can handle it. And that was the thing. That hope was the thing that saved her life. And she lived for many more years after that.
We look at the symptoms and we go, well, what's a drug or therapy that matches that symptom? And we give that. And we kind of like do a cursory, eat well and exercise. Right? And that's about it. And I have to say most of my medical colleagues do eat well and they do exercise. But that's about it. We don't really teach people how to treat their bodies well and to honor their body temple. Now, on the second level is where we have a lot of our wonderful functional medicine practitioners, our naturopaths, our homeopaths. So they get that there is a connection beyond just the physical. So they address the mental and the emotional much of the time, and nutrition and some of the things that are considered, which is really funny, alternative in that first level. Right? In that first level, you'd be injecting stuff into you, you'd be popping pills, you'd be covering your face, things like that, because you're afraid of germs or whatever is going on. And I honor people in that space. It is okay to be in that space. On that second level, we go, wow, the body can heal itself. How do we amplify that natural tendency for the body to heal itself? So that may mean environmental mitigation, decrease EMF for some people, better nutrition, maybe some supplements that are appropriate for that person, learning sleep hygiene, learning to address, I have a trauma from my childhood that I'm very negative about. I really need to release that. Not stuffing our emotions, but actually healing them. And then on that third level of medicine, that's where I play. I call it light medicine. We are now looking at the subtle energetics. So beyond emotional, mental, physical, we're looking at the energetic, spiritual, and dimensional levels.
The thought, you have stage 4 lung cancer and you're going to die, whoosh, electrical shock, and then whoosh, the fear. All of a sudden, bam, Now you just gained about 40,000 pounds of density of, oh my gosh, this is really serious. So until you can change, neutralize that electromagnetic shock, you're stuck with it, which is really, really unfortunate because we're not taught about energy. So we're not taught how to neutralize the story. We're not taught that if that story feels that bad, it means it's that far out of alignment with who you are as a soul. So it's really, really difficult until we start to understand how our bodies actually function, which we've never been told the truth about our bodies. Until we understand how the energy and the physicality work together, how our emotions connect to our bodies. Until we understand that connection, we're going to continue to suffer needlessly. We're going to continue to suffer through our own healing process and block the healing process with pills and radiation and chemotherapy and all kinds of things that are not necessary in the body when we start to understand that the body heals itself every single time.
Let's say you received a diagnosis and you want to explore healing yourself. What are the first steps towards reversing a diagnosis?
The first step to reversing a diagnosis is to quickly enter a certain place of acceptance. Now, this is in my opinion. Now, I don't mean acceptance of the diagnosis, like whatever the doctor said, because we all know doctors would love to take that expiration stamp and stamp it on people and say, this is what you have, 6 months, 9 months, they'll hold up your foot and stamp your expiration date. We all know they love that. I'm not talking about accepting that, okay? I'm talking a different type of acceptance. Accept that you got to do something. Accept your responsibility of what you how you may have contributed to it through either, habits or thinking or feeling emotional, right? And then do the detective work. What could it have been? And do your detective work and then begin taking the appropriate action.
I know that you are interested in the idea that the body is a self-healing system, which absolutely is what nature shows us. And so when you have an acute injury, like let's say, I broke my tibia, what would be the first thing that would happen is there would be this massive swelling. What is that? That's your body making its own cast, right? It brings all this fluid into the tissue and squeezes the injury so it can't move, which is exactly the purpose of putting a cast on a broken bone. So your body's already doing what it needs to do. And, we think, our body's not wise enough. We have to, do something else. But the truth is, there is something else that you could do that's very reasonable and conservative at home, which is you go to a local medical supply store, and they will have some kind of boot or brace or soft cast that you don't, need to get the plaster out and make a mess and worry that it's too tight. It's something that is prefab, and for maybe $40 or $50, you get that thing and you put it on, and then you can heal at home. Right? And you don't need to go in and get them putting screws and rods in your bones or, all this other stuff and sending you wild bills. And there's some, very basic things. Like if something is not going right, it'll be obvious. You'll know it. And then you can, always go get help if you feel you can't figure it out.
Reversing a diagnosis is actually ownership. It's ownership of the problem, of the situation, taking control. Because a lot of people sit in front of the doctor and they're given the diagnosis and then they throw it back. It's like a tennis match. And they say, what do I do? Tell me. I'll do anything. I'll do whatever you tell me. And so it's this outsourcing of responsibility, which is the way that Western medicine has designed itself to be over the last 50 to 70 to 80 years, is that, medical doctors are of this prestigious status, and they're wizards, and they're these amazing humans that we, they know everything. They're super smart. They're highly paid. There's all of these social elements that come into play for our belief about how important they are, which is not me saying that they're not that. It's simply saying that No body is a better expert in your body than you.
If we can work out, well, why has it come? What is the message, the beautiful message it has? If we can resolve any disharmonies, any disharmonic patterns in our lives, if we can remove any interference patterns, and interference patterns is often patterns from outside of ourselves, either society or family or friends or acquaintances or people, if we can remove those interference patterns, and finally, if we can release any resistance to healing.
Work with somebody who's going to look at every area of your life. It's not just your physical body that gets you ill. It's your emotions. It's your relationships. It's your mental state. It's your job. It's feeling, for instance, like a trapped rat. I mean, that's oftentimes what happens with cancer, feeling that there's no way out, that life will never be good again, losing the joy in your life. So any good practitioner will ask you about your mental, emotional life, the state of your relationships, any traumas you've had in your past. They'll delve into all of that to see if that is the source of your illness, as well as looking at your diet and your exercise regime. So number one is really working with a practitioner who's going to see you as this holistic person and explore all of that and trying to make you well.
The first step to reversing any negative situation or toxic situation, be it physical, biological, medical, emotional, relational, is taking ownership for the contribution to the problem that you've got, and basically finding the path forward. And that'll take a bit of exploration and experimentation, and moving in that space with curiosity is really important. Childlike curiosity, rather than, oh my God, this has to work. If this doesn't work, then it's all over. We want to take childlike curiosity to learning and exploring and being like, let's see what happens down here, and take full ownership of that journey. And I think, that general attitude towards life is going to just transform your life in all sorts of ways, not just health.
Every time you talk about your pain, you're reinforcing your pain. I'm not saying it's wrong to talk about your pain, but not to 100 people. Not over and over and over again. You want to talk about your pain to your practitioner, as here's my current symptoms. This is what I'm currently experiencing. Hey, that'll work, right? Because we have some place to start from, but we don't need to reiterate it over and over again, because the more your consciousness repeats that train of thought, the more the universe responds. It naturally does it. It's a universal law. It has to respond back to give you more pain. So by empowering yourself and having some help sometimes to create this vision of your new reality, your ideal reality, that is a wonderful start to your healing process.
The very first thing has got to be getting meaningful diagnostics, and then it's working on the mind and the emotions and resolving any self-destructive beliefs or any emotional trauma, releasing that. There are trauma release techniques that you can use. And then it's doing the physical work, detoxification, getting dense nutrients into the body, and healing. It depends on the nature of the health issue, of course.
No matter what the diagnosis is, the first step in my mind is you have to believe that you can get better. So, and this is what I've seen throughout my years of practice in my patients that come in and they know in their mind, body, and soul, they know they can get better. They're going to get better. My patients that come in and they're maybe initially a little bit skeptical, but I'm able to talk to them, they will get better. It might take them a little longer. But the ones that come in and they're like, I had this diagnosis, I'm never going to get better, I would just like a natural solution other than the drug, I don't tend to see them having as many improvements as my other patients that really have that belief. So the number one is up here. We've talked a lot about mind-body connection. If you've got your mind straight about what's going on, and if your mind can believe, your brain can believe that you can get better, guess what? You're going to get better.
My first step is go into stillness. You don't have to go, oh, omni, and do what you think yogis do or be ultra spiritual or anything like that. It's like connect to the body. What is it telling you? What are you feeling in that space? And then maybe it would be helpful to have a coach, a mentor, healing practitioner, like myself, just to guide you back to you so you can connect with that inner wisdom, connect to source, connect to that zero-point field and create what it is you do want.
We're non-physical beings, and as such, we are here embodying our beliefs. We're bringing our ideas, our thoughts to life. So everything that we believe about our bodies comes to pass. The universe works in very specific, very predictable ways. It's not random, it's not haphazard, it doesn't work one way for you and a different way for me. And our bodies are designed to work consistently across the board. There's a great power in making a choice. If you want to live in peace and harmony with your light fully turned back on, all you have to do is make the choice. Once you make that choice, all the parts and pieces start to show up. The universe literally will reconfigure itself to match your choice. There's a part of you that is connected directly to Source. There's a part of you that knows the answer to every question before the question is even asked. So there's a part of you that knows exactly what to do to bring yourself back into balance. When we believe that we are being attacked by a disease, that becomes our reality. If we want to create health, we have to tell a different story. All of these stories are available to us. We can live out any life story that we choose. We are creating our own life stories all the time. So we have to choose, are we going to go down that path or are we going to create a different path? We're not here to create somebody else's story of what's wrong with us. We're here to create our own story. So knowing what our own story is really the key to overcoming all of that.
We've heard from MDs, PhDs, DOs, scientists, researchers, health advocates, and healers of all sorts. I've learned a lot on this journey, and I hope you have as well. So the question is, does the body have the ability to heal itself? Are pharmaceuticals supporting our healing, or are they actually keeping us from discovering what we need to change in our lifestyle to begin the healing process? I believe that I have found my answers. I leave it to you to draw your own conclusions. Thank you for joining me on this journey as we looked at the inside effects.
I don't want to think about